waiting for everybody to get in.
Hello, hello. Enjoy the snazzy music in the meantime. I do feel we need a dance, Marie.
I know. Okay, or maybe we get started so we don't get into trouble.
That's right. So that we don't start a dance. Good idea.
Exactly. Numbers are leveling out. Great.
Yay!
Welcome.
Woo!
Welcome, everybody. Can you believe this is our 8th McKinsey Unpacked episode?
It's amazing they keep letting us do this, Marie.
I know, and if you now wonder, what have I missed in the last 7 episodes? We will send you a link to a website afterwards where we can watch all episodes in your own time. But welcome to our 8th McKinsey Unpacked session. I'm Marie. Hello from Amsterdam.
And I am Blair. Also, hello from Amsterdam, though Marie and I are not co-located in the same space right now. We're actually working together in Amsterdam this week, which is pretty wonderful.
Yes, but I'm home already with the children, and yeah, they have strict instructions not to come into this.
We'll see how that goes.
But let's hope this
We'll
works.
see how that goes.
But Blair and I, we have the pleasure to co-lead our global recruiting teams at McKinsey. So it's a huge pleasure of ours to connect with candidates around the world like yourselves tonight. So with this monthly McKinsey Unpacked session, we really want to try to unpack and unveil some of the missed and less known facts about McKinsey, and we're so glad that you're joining us tonight.
Yeah, and of course we chose the unpacked theme. You may have heard consultants do travel a lot. It's part of the gift of having impact. We sit side by side with our clients, we sit side by side with our colleagues. And so we thought it would be fun to unpack the McKinsey suitcase and really give you an insider's view and what it really is like to work here, what keeps those of us who've been here a long time showing up every year, and try and give you some tips and tricks as you are navigating your own career. So we've got a really exciting topic today. But just to give you the lay of the land, we of course have 3 sections. I say of course because McKinsey is notorious for everything is in 3s.
Or 5.
Marie, maybe we need a third. Well, we have a third guest tonight. We don't have a third host, but that works out perfectly. But 3 sections. The first we'll start off with is today's map, which is just a quick sense of what's on our mind. What are we thinking about this month? The second is the heart of our Unpacked session, where we will reveal our amazing guest star for the day, who's going to unpack a topic that we think is really relevant for top talent like you all around the world. And then we'll close at the end with snack for the road, because as Marie knows with her kids, I know with my kids, you never, ever, ever travel with children without snacks. So we'll leave you with a tip, some advice, something that you can take away as we roll our time together. So Marie, without any further ado, let's get started. What's the map today? What's on your mind? What's going on?
So March has been a busy month full of celebration and underscoring the commitment to gender equality and advancing women in the workplace for actually the world, with the celebration of International Women's Day, but then also for McKinsey. So as a firm, we celebrated International Women's Day across all of our offices in Amsterdam. We celebrated that on March 7th with a big champagne toast celebrating the amazing talented women that work across our firm in all the offices in different roles. That was really fun. And then March is also the month where we are at the tail end of the application campaign for one of my favorite events, which is the Next Generation Women Leaders event. And if you are a woman based in Europe, the application deadline is tomorrow. So after listening to this,
no pressure.
Don't hesitate and wait. You can still apply until tomorrow. It's a really cool event where we bring together talented, inspirational women at the beginning of their career and give them opportunities to connect with each other, have a platform and a network to inspire each other to make a difference, and to learn and reflect on their own leadership skills and how they want to chart their leadership journey going forward. It's really fun. So the European application deadline is tomorrow, and then if you're based in Asia, the application deadline for our Asia event is on May 1st. So these were 2 exciting things in March, and then there was another exciting thing in March that happened.
Yes, and that leads us to our guest speaker today. But this month, a new book was released called The Broken Rung, and it is written by,
Ta-da!
oh, look, Marie's got party favors. Uh, it is a fabulous book that is authored by three senior women leaders at McKinsey, who each of whom have had an outsized role in helping to build our affinity, diversity, and inclusion strategies at the firm. They're also, I think, personal heroes and mentors to Marie and me as senior women who, they have blazed many trails for other senior women at the firm. So we are super excited today to have Kweilin Ellingrud with us. So maybe we can, hello, Kweilin.
Let's
Hello,
bring her there.
wonderful to be
Hello.
here.
Yes.
Here's the big reveal. Fantastic. We are going to dive in, but The Broken Rung, for those of you that don't yet know it, it is a fascinating read. It is based on a ton of data, of course, because we're McKinsey and we always are, but also insights from over 50 remarkable senior leaders, as well as the experiences of our own firm leaders, like Kweilin, to really explore this topic of the broken rung, which is essentially the fact that women, even when we've achieved educational parity to our male counterparts, we're still less likely to be promoted or advanced throughout our careers than male counterparts. So you may have heard of the glass ceiling. This is actually earlier in your career, which is this broken rung. And so what I think is cool is the book explores the concept, but then very quickly pivots to practical strategies for not just women, but frankly, allies, colleagues, friends, and family who work with women about how we can actually overcome this phenomenon of the broken rug. I don't know where Kweilin finds time to write best-selling books. By the way, we just found out it's number 4 on the best-selling list right now.
Yay, congratulations.
Which is amazing. Kwelin's got a couple other things going on. She is a senior partner who serves clients at McKinsey, and she's been here for about 25 years and is based in our Minneapolis office. And as I mentioned, she's also the global leader of our diversity and inclusion efforts as well. Kweilin wears multiple hats at the firm, and we are really excited, guys, that we not only managed to get her on our Unpacked session, that we got her right as the book was launched. So welcome, Kweilin. We are so excited, and congratulations again on the bestseller list. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's wonderful to be here with you both.
Welcome, Kweilin. We are so glad. I know you have probably a whirlwind tour of lots of interviews, so we are so glad that you're taking a bit of time with us today to discuss your exciting book. But before we dive into that, we just want to learn a little bit more about you, Kweilin. What got you excited about consulting and McKinsey in particular, and what kept you here for over 20 years with all its ups and downs and highs and challenges that any career will bring with itself?
Absolutely. I think I joined McKinsey in New York right after college, and I was thinking about a lot of different options. I actually had not heard of consulting in college, right? I didn't know anybody who was a consultant. And so as I
Same.
started through the recruiting process, I was looking at law school, I was looking at investment banking. And then as I thought about kind of a career in business, I started to learn about this thing called consulting. And the more I learned about it, the more it felt like a great kind of general business education. And so I wanted to apply. I had an exploding offer elsewhere, and I applied for just McKinsey actually, and got the offer and accepted. And I have to say, it is the best learning experience you can get anywhere, bar none. I still believe that to this day. And it has been just an incredible growth experience, stretching you in new ways, making you uncomfortable. At least, every year or 2 years as you jump into new roles. It's been an incredible growth trajectory.
I love that.
Great.
We'll talk
And that
about it.
resonates. We always
Yeah,
say
it
that
does.
learning never stops, and I would assume, I don't know if that's true for you, but even as a seasoned senior partner, I would assume you still get your fair share of learning, even now, which is so wonderful that it just never gets boring.
Absolutely.
I joke with people that I wish I would reach a plateau in my career where I could just dial it in, but McKinsey's not that place, right? You
Yeah.
never dial it in. You're always learning something new, which I do think is part of the exciting part for us. Well, gosh, Kweilin, there's so much rich content to cover in terms of the broken rung and your experience in writing it. Again, I would love to, this notion that the broken rung may actually be more pervasive or more damaging to women's progress than the glass ceiling. It's a pretty radical notion. I mean, I think we've all grown up with this idea that the glass ceiling is something that caps women. But I think the thesis of your book and your insight is we start from behind to begin with, earlier in our career. Tell
Absolutely.
us a bit about the genesis of how did you come up with this idea for the book? How did you and your co-authors collaborate on it? Just tell us a little bit about the origin story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the three of us, Lorena, Maria, and I, have been doing research in this space for about a decade. I've been more globally focused, Lorena more US focused, and Maria more European focused. And as we were sharing our insights around the world in different forums, each time we were struck at how much this was new news. People just didn't know the facts. And if you don't
Interesting.
know the facts, you can't make the best decision for yourself.
Great point.
And that might be to optimize not for salary, but for, flexibility or for things that are kind of closer to your values. But the first step is you have to know the facts. Otherwise, it's hard to peer around the corner. So that was kind of the impetus that pushed us to say, what's the book that we each wish we had, right? 25 years ago to kind of
Love
chart the
that.
course, pulling it all together, not just the data and the insights, which, as McKinsey, we love,
Sure.
but also the stories to bring it to life. And you mentioned, Blair, right? 50 plus stories of women around the world, very different industries, completely different functions. Some are, names you would recognize, other people you have never heard of. But how did they chart each of these pivotal moments in a career successfully? And how does that kind of illustrate the point that we see in the data? And so I loved kind of the coming together of the data and the
Yep.
stories that for me are so memorable.
I love that. I mean, personally, I've always taken away a lot of valuable learnings from people who walked the path before me and just taking lessons learned and then, using different elements to chart my own course. So having almost like a compendium of so many stories is just such a great gift. But like you said, Blair, I think actually there's been a lot of research around the glass ceiling, and that's a term that's quite well known. I'm not sure how many people know about what the broken rung really is. So maybe we can start by defining that a little bit. What is the broken rung?
Yeah.
What has your research found, and how did you come across that this is actually a first big problem that women have to overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about kind of the talent pyramid as a pyramid. There's about 70% of employees who are at that entry level, right? That first level. And that's about 48% women at that entry level. But 70% of the employees are there and they're looking up and seeing kind of a broken rung to that first promotion. So for every 100 men, and this is US data, but we see similar patterns around the world, for every 100 men who are promoted to that first manager role, 81 women are promoted. And so there's 19 women missing in leadership positions. And if you add that up over a 5-year period in the US, for example, that's 1 million missing women in managerial or leadership positions.
Wow.
And you've got a million missing women here from this 5-year period, another million missing women there from another 5-year period. You kind of see how that builds and compounds across the entire talent pipeline. And so you mentioned the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling would be at that tippy top, right, of the kind of talent pyramid. There, in the US, although it differs around the world, 29% of that C-suite, so people reporting to the CEO, are women. But very few people get to that tippy top of the talent pyramid and get to bump up against the glass ceiling.
Yep.
Everybody goes through that first broken rung at the entry level. We're all have to either get through it or get stopped by it in some cases. And if you think about it, not just for women, but also women of color, it differs. So we said 100 men get promoted, 81 women. For every 100 men, actually 86 white women get promoted. Interestingly, 99 Asian American women, almost no gap between men and Asian American women, at least at the early part. It sets in later in the talent pipeline. For every 100 men, 64 Latina women and 54 Black women. So as you kind of
It's
get
even more
into
pronounced.
other women of color, Latina and Black in particular, that gap is pretty significant.
So that is sobering data. I think the obvious question is what causes that, right? And I think in the book you make the point that sort of educational parity, right? Your point on the entry level, the 70,000 starting out, roughly are starting with the same set of, I'll call it credentials, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the educational background you have, the level that you are, your tenure. But that isn't the only thing that sort of explains your trajectory and frankly your potential lifetime progression path, earnings, etc. The other part of that are the experiences and the skills you actually build on the job. So the sort of, the what you build on top of your starting point, and that's what you call experience capital, which we thought was a fascinating concept. And that's really where women lag, that women lag in developing that experience capital. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more, what is experience capital? Why is that so important to build to help you project? And maybe how, you know, has it personally affected you, or have you thought about experience capital in your own career?
Absolutely. So experience capital, said simply, is the wisdom, the experience, the knowledge that you learn on the job.
Okay.
And around the world, we did a sampling across countries. It drives about half of the average person's lifetime earnings.
Wow.
So half comes from what you learn on the job. The other half comes from your education and characteristics that you bring to your first job.
Got it.
And Blair, as you were describing, in pretty much all developed countries around the world, women are outperforming men academically. So in the US, in Canada, China, Europe, women have the majority of college degrees. In the US, it's 59%. Women are also the majority of valedictorians, higher average GPAs, majority of master's degrees, majority of PhDs, not necessarily always in STEM, but across, all of the disciplines. And so academically, we're outperforming. It actually drops down at that entry level, that base of the pyramid, what we were talking about, where 70% of the employees are. It drops down to 48%. Because not all first entry level jobs require a college degree.
Okay.
But then it drops by every kind of point after that by 3 percentage points, 5 percentage points. But that part, kind of the education part, we've got down, right? Women are doing well on that part. It's the other path, this experience capital, where we're, I think, not building as much experience capital as our male peers, and certainly not kind of getting credit for that in our career earnings. And so we kind of capture the problem, the broken rung, early on, and then every other chapter is basically, and what do you do about it?
Yes.
As a woman, as an ally, right? How do you make different decisions in light of the fact that we need to build more experience capital? How do you build more of it? How do you build it faster across a career? And I said the average individual is 50-50. In terms of 50% of your lifetime earnings from experience capital. That differs by country. So for example, in the United States, in Canada, and Europe, where kind of average education levels are higher, more of your lifetime earnings will come from the education side versus the experience capital side. In India, for example, more of it will come from kind of experience capital and what you learn on the job. So that's differing by country. It also differs by occupation. So if you're a doctor and it takes, let's say, 12 years to even get into the door of being a doctor, that first role, more of your lifetime earnings will come from the education part and less from experience capital and what you learn on the job. Versus if you're a plumber, if you're a waitress, right? If you're in these jobs where what you learn and how well you do it, can you rise to a manager role in that occupational category? More of your lifetime earnings in those roles are from experience capital. So I think the question is, how do we as women build more experience capital systematically across our careers?
Yes. So, and you said, I mean, the book gives very practical advice. Again, that's what I love about the book, that it's a compendium of, you almost want to marker and line everything.
That's right.
Because
With the sticky notes.
because it's so full of amazing content that you probably need to read it a couple of times to really internalize everything. Because we do want that parity that we see at the entry level to go through, because not just for the women, but I think as managers, you set the tone for the teams, the organization, and if that is a diverse group of people, we know diverse teams perform better. That will be good, not just for the individuals, but also for people around them in the organization. So let's dive into some of your tips and advice. And we picked a few that spoke to us as talent attraction leaders that we want to dive deeper into. But if there are others that are your personal favorites, we'd love to hear those too. But so, I mean, we are in talent attraction, so we talk a lot with candidates around why they should pick McKinsey over other alternatives. So you have, one of your advices, pick the company over the job, which is music to our ears. So why is that so important?
Yeah. It's important because it is the single biggest decision that can increase your lifetime earnings. If you pick the right company, what we call a people and performance winner company, and I'll describe what that is in a moment, that is correlated with 50% higher lifetime earnings. And ideally, you do that early in your career, because early exposure to one of these companies just sets you on a different learning trajectory, sets you on a different trajectory of, building that experience capital. And
Should
these
get
kinds
you
of
talk to a lot of
companies,
our candidates, Kweilin, because
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would argue
exactly.
McKinsey
That's
is
right.
a learning in performance environment, right?
That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
it's true. And it's both true and rather convenient that the data shows it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the three factors, whether you're choosing McKinsey, which I think is absolutely true of McKinsey, but there's other companies that kind of fit this bill. People in performance winner companies do three things really well. Number one, they invest in your learning and development. That might
Yeah.
be a certain percentage of time. That might be kind of consistent learning opportunities or trainings across a career. That might be a digital learning expectation or a strong, culture of mutual feedback. But it's a real focus and culture around learning and development. Second, they think hard and promote cross-functional rotations. So you don't just
Mhm.
start in finance and end there 30 years later. You go into different roles, you see the problem in the business from different perspectives. And third, they have a very clear strategy. And usually you can see this based on their financial results relative to competitors, but they've got a clear strategy and they're executing it. But companies that have those three characteristics, and you can usually tell outside in, are exactly what you want exposure to really early in your career.
I love that too. I love that actually as a cheat sheet for your due diligence, right? We all do research on potential companies we're interested in or career paths. And I
Yeah.
think that's such a practical way to think about where is this a place that, if I'm a woman or if I'm an ally and I want women around me to succeed, that I can actually use those criteria to help select which companies I'd be interested in. And of course, we're biased because Marie and I lead global recruiting, but uh, it's not surprising to me that those are some of the criteria that we would choose because I agree that's part of the reason I know each of us have been here over 20 years is this idea of optionality. We are not just allowed to, we are actually expected to move around, try on different hats, try different roles, build new functional skills, play different leadership roles. So we really are forced to build our full set of paths and capabilities. And there is a constant focus on learning all the time. And it's very purposeful. We talk about apprenticeship, for example. That's a huge part of our model. That's a very intentional thing we do to teach each other. So I love that. And I think that's a really smart way to think about narrowing in some respects your job search when you're thinking about a company.
Yeah, and I think the best way to find out about a company is not just reading their websites, but to talking to people
Yes.
and to really understanding people's experiences versus just reading it online. So any opportunity you have to meet representatives from an organization, that's helpful to understand, how an experience is like.
Yep. I mean, it's the whole, that's how this series was born, is we wanted to give people a chance to hear from real people at McKinsey. Okay, Kweilin, another strategy that I really liked was this idea of the multiplier effect.
Yeah.
And what I thought was such a powerful comment in the book, you say women tend to be over mentored but under sponsored. And I think that's a really important point. I think mentorship and sponsorship are often words people erroneously use as synonyms. Tell us a little bit about that. What does it mean that women are over mentored and under sponsored? And then what do we do about it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Women and people of color are over
Okay.
mentored. Lots of advice, right? Here's what I would do in your
Yes.
situation. Here was my path. And advice is helpful, but it doesn't change the odds for anybody. Sponsorship is different. Sponsorship is a real commitment. I am going to create an opportunity for you that didn't exist before. That could be a project or an opportunity to kind of step up and get more visibility. That might be a promotion that I was in the room for that conversation and helped advocate for you. But there's a real concrete opportunity that didn't exist before that I help make happen for you. And that's what sponsorship looks like. It's rare. You can only sponsor so many people effectively, right? Probably you can count on one hand the people you can really do that well for,
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
two if you're a really great sponsor. And vice versa. You don't need a ton of sponsors. You don't need 5, 10 sponsors.
True.
Frankly, if they're doing their job well, 2 to me is probably the optimal number of sponsors. 1, and you kind of have all your eggs in one basket. If they leave or something happens, it's a little dangerous. But 2, if they're really pulling their weight, can do the job very, very well. And usually you go through a bit of a, development curve. You don't become a sponsor overnight. Usually, maybe you were a mentor. We had coffee chats. Maybe you were advising me on kind of different paths or how you navigated your career or advice you have for me at certain pivot points. And then over time, we work together a little bit more, and then you do become a sponsor, and there's kind of that mutual commitment there. But that's sponsorship.
But I think it's what's really important, what you just said in the last sentence, the mutual commitment.
Yes.
Like, what does the sponsor do for you, and what are you doing for the sponsor? Because it's a bit of a give and take relationship as well. If a sponsor needs help with something, that you if they look for somebody to work with on their projects, that you are excited to join, and you're not saying, oh well, no thank you, I'm not really interested in what you're doing right now. So it's a two-way street. Do you have an example? Because I know that's of course also a big focus for us at McKinsey. Do you have a sponsorship story from your own personal experience, Kweilin, that you could share?
I do. I've had incredible sponsors over the years, and frankly, they inspire me to pay it forward. Um, I met my first sponsor kind of on my first engagement and worked with them. I think it's really hard to develop a sponsor if you're not working together in kind of
I agree.
day-to-day
I agree.
ways.
Because they need to know what you're capable of, right? They need
Yeah,
to trust a
exactly.
bit your ability, and it's easier to do that when you've experienced it a bit firsthand.
Agree.
Agreed. And interact regularly.
Yeah.
So you might, start in a particular industry and then go somewhere else over time. And then you're probably going to not have those original people as sponsors. They may be mentors, and that can be really helpful because they can provide a bit of that independent kind of counsel or
Yep.
advice. But I met one of my sponsors early on. She actually introduced me to another sponsor who, started just as a informal relationship. But she said, you know what, I think your style and based on what you're interested in, you would really like working with this person. Let me connect you both. And over time, got to work with that person and, would walk through fire for them.
Yeah.
But it was really on my side, it was, do I like working with them? Do I learn more from them? Do I admire them as an individual? Because if I don't, then it's probably going to be pretty hard for me to get
Yes.
excited to do that kind of mutual commitment we were talking about. So I found a few over time, back to the mutual kind of commitment point. I'm working with them. I'm helping them be more successful, deliver impact on client engagements. We might be working on knowledge development together or, particular initiatives. And in turn, they're helping me both navigate, create new opportunities, and kind of find my way at McKinsey.
Yeah.
That.
And overall at McKinsey, I mean, every year we run a mentorship and sponsorship survey where we ask actually everybody who works at McKinsey, who are the people that you that sponsor you, that mentor you? Are you happy with the quality of sponsorship you get? To just also see if everybody has a sponsor, and if there's somebody where maybe sponsors left or they haven't been lucky to find that relationship for which they would go through the fire, as you said, Kweilin, then our professional development teams, our people teams, try to see whether they can help create an opportunity for people to connect with people ahead of them that could be maybe become sponsors over time. So it's something that we focus on a lot at McKinsey.
Agreed.
Absolutely. I think I'll try to be a bit more modest after this, but I think we are world class at sponsorship and mentorship. I would personally aspire in your first 2 years at McKinsey to find one sponsor, right?
Yes.
It's not easy because you
Yes.
also want to try a bunch of different things. And
Yes.
again, if you're not working in that industry or function, it's going to be hard to find a sponsor. But by the end of your second year, it would be wonderful to have one sponsor. As you get into your third and fourth year, let's say you're a manager, you would want to find 2 sponsors in that time period,
Yeah.
kind of year 3, year 4. At least that's how it happened for me. And it felt balanced. It felt
Yes.
like, I could support those sponsors. Those sponsors could support me and feel accountability there. And that feels like, 1 going to 2 over time.
Yeah,
And I do-
think that's super practical advice.
I do think it's often easier for lower tenured people to ask for advice, which is mentorship.
Yeah.
We feel pretty comfortable saying, would you be, willing to have a cup of coffee? I'd love to pick your brain on something.
Yeah.
It's a much different thing to say, would you consider helping create some opportunities for me? And so I think I love sort of your example, and Marie, your point as well, that you build sponsorship by doing good work and
Yes.
being and radiating what you're passionate about, what you're interested in. You invite people to want to sponsor you when you, for example, show interest in the work that they're doing, or offer to say, gosh, Clay, on this research that you're doing that might turn into a book someday, is there a place I could get involved? I'm really passionate about this. So again, it needs to be genuine. I think, it's quite easy. I think we can probably all highlight an example where someone has approached us for, to be a mentor or sponsor, and it feels a little bit like checking the box, like maybe it wasn't so thought out. But I do think women in particular need to have a little bit more courage to put themselves out there, to get excited, connect themselves to people that are doing things. Either they emulate the work that they do, or they really love this leadership style they developed, and create opportunities to add value to what they're doing. And that tends to open the door to sponsorship, I have found.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right,
Absolutely.
let's move on. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Kweilin, you
No,
didn't
no,
want to.
let's move on and we can come back if we have time.
Yeah, let's move on to another one of our favorite, which is also a little bit of a myth we have been trying to unpack about McKinsey in the
Yes.
past. So in your book, you say treat soft skills like hard skills, which is so true. And again, something I think that is very much underestimated as candidates look at McKinsey and think about how they should prepare maybe for the interview process, because we look at problem solving skills and we look at personal behavioral skills, which we do treat equal in our interview process, despite some people, I think, to this day still not totally believing it. But yes, it's equally important. So why do you and Maria and Lorena, why have you placed such an importance on soft skills? And maybe also, how do you see that changing even to become more important in a world that is ever changing with generative AI and anyway tech, taking a much bigger place in our professional lives?
Absolutely. The data says that we're going to all need more of two particular skills over the next 5-10 years. Soft skills or social and emotional skills, and I'll describe those a bit more, and technological skills.
Yeah.
And the tech skills, it's not coding, right? Because generative AI is going to code better than you and I ever will.
That's right. Thank goodness,
But
by the way.
yes,
I'm
exactly.
glad I skipped that. Yeah.
But the tech skills is more, can you interact with technology effectively to do
Yes.
your job, right? And are you open to learning, to becoming a power user, to experimenting with how is that going to change my role, my group? What are the opportunities? Just being open and learning actively on the tech side. On the soft skills side, it's just so undervalued. And there's this myth that, you're either born with soft skills or you're not, right? You can't grow them. And that's absolutely not true. And
Yeah.
by soft skills or social and emotional skills, it's everything from negotiation, very critical, empathy, building trust, inspiring a team, kind of raising the level of aspiration. When you think about great leaders, it's typically not the technical skills that differentiate them. It's the soft skills or the social
Yes.
and emotional skills, right?
Yes.
To go from a good to a great leader, all of that is soft skills. And as we looked across job postings, about 25% of the skills required for many of these jobs are quote unquote soft skills.
Okay.
These are also skills we typically under signal or under kind of talk about on our resumes, right? So you'll say, I have these technical skills, even I can speak these languages, but you don't necessarily say, leadership elements, empathy, and you don't have to talk about it explicitly all the time, but like the way you use verbs, active verbs, or, led a team to achieve XYZ, instigated a new process to do this, right? Those are active verbs that are showing the soft skills and the leadership elements that we're looking for. And Marie, to your point, right, 50-50 is how we weight kind of the problem solving, the case question, and these leadership skills on kind of the personal experience interview. And
Yep.
so many times I talk to candidates who are prepping the case
know, just
question,
the
right,
case.
with 80-90% of their time.
Yes.
And they haven't stepped back to deeply reflect,
Yes.
what is the leadership story I'm going to tell if we ask, tell me about a story of leadership, tell
Yes.
me a story about leading a team to achieve something, tell me a story when you kind of convince somebody of something, challenging. These both like thinking through, what do I want to emphasize? What do I want to be able to tell? And then how do I tell that with more color, thinking
Yep.
through what was my mindset, what was plan A, that didn't work, what was plan B. That requires just a lot of reflection and frankly practice to do really well.
I love that.
So I would just encourage you, right, completely switch the
Yes.
balance. Maybe it's more 50-50, some cases maybe 60-40, depending on what you're comfortable with as you prep for a very equally weighted interview experience.
I love that. And I love that point that soft skills, just like hard skills, are muscles you have to build.
Absolutely.
And our assessment process is all about assessing intrinsics and potential, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff around. For example, if you're early in your career, you may not have had a chance to actually manage other people yet. That just may be a straight function of how long you've been in the workforce and the positions that you've been in. But
Mhm.
everybody we hire, for example, our aspiration is that you become a partner of the firm someday, which means you'll be actively managing multiple teams of people. And so I love that idea that pay attention to the soft skills, be as thoughtful about building those muscles and those capabilities as you are, the other hard skills that everybody is excited to put on their CV, because I do think that is what ends up really differentiating you, particularly in our post-tech, post-AI world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, you might not be able to lead a team from day one, but I mean, soft skills you can show already from day one how you show up at
That's right.
work with your team, how you're making a difference,
Client. Yeah.
taking a leading
Yep.
role even within your team to volunteer to do stuff, or I mean, so that really starts on day one.
Absolutely.
Yep. Kweilin, I heard you whisper client, which I think is something that
Yeah.
people are surprised by truly a little bit, that
Mhm.
our model at McKinsey is quite early in your tenure. Like, I remember being a brand new summer associate, so all of 2 weeks on the job, I actually worked directly with a more senior client team
Same
member.
here.
Yeah, and I had to build a relationship with this person. I had to build trust. I had to, to be able to problem solve effectively together and actually address the issue we were being engaged to help fix. I had to actually, be a credible thought partner. And here I was thinking, why would you listen to me? You've been in this business for 20 years. How have you thought about that? How have you thought about sort of the confidence and X factor around, gosh, these are sometimes some skills I haven't had to flex this muscle yet, but I'm going to try it.
Absolutely. I think so much of it is the soft skills, the social and emotional skills. And the question is, do they trust you, right? Do they trust your intentions? Do they want to spend any time with you? And then there's a whole set of internal biases that I think oftentimes we need to get over ourselves. And
I
there's a whole
love that.
chapter around all sorts of different types of biases.
Yep.
There's conscious bias, there's unconscious bias, which we talk a lot about. There's external bias. So when you see me, what do you think? What do you associate? How do you judge
Mhm.
me? But also internal bias, things that I have kind of internalized about people like me, or
Yep.
right, things that I may perceive of, ooh, that client is, the age of my father or has
Right.
been in
So
the
I'm going to
industry for 30
assume that's right.
years.
Yep.
And so I think there's also a whole set of internal biases that we need to think through of what mindsets are getting in my way that are holding me back from being a good thought partner to this client. And then just building confidence, because if you're thinking about that problem 12 hours a day and that's your only focus, you do bring new ideas. You can bring ideas from other industries, just different ways of approaching things. You don't feel the same constraints as somebody who has been in the industry and in a company maybe for 20, 30 years might feel.
Yeah.
And so kind of pushing through some of that and thinking about, orthogonal ways that you can even use some of those different perspectives and the new to the problem thinking to show value and explore some new options.
I love that. I love that. And I think I love your push too. I think the bias section in the book is some straight talk, which I think is important. Your point on being really honest about our own internal biases and how that can shape and affect how we see others is a really
Absolutely.
important point, because I think, again, biases are actually, it's not a dirty word. It's something that our brain does to help to navigate our, completely nuts complex world. It gives us
Indeed.
shortcuts, but you've
Yeah.
got to be aware of those biases so that you can effectively manage them, right? Because they're never going to totally go away, but you need to effectively manage them. So I love that.
And find coping strategies when you encounter biases
Yeah.
yourself, right? That they don't throw you off track completely if you encounter something maybe that was a bias situation.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with biases in your career, Kweilin?
Yeah, there's a whole set of internal biases that we just talked about that have been a bit of a mindset exercise of how do I kind
Mm.
of build confidence? How do I test a different style in a meeting and get comfortable with that, right, as I stretch outside my comfort zone? And then there's the external bias, which I can't control. I can only, to your point, control how I react to it, or how I'm an ally to somebody else in a meeting when their idea is, misappropriated and given, somebody else is given credit for it. So partly it's
That
just
never happens,
recognizing.
Kweilin.
It's recognizing these moments when they happen. I often kind of treat it with humor. So I will call it out in the moment if I can, sometimes make a joke about it. Or if it's, let's say it's coming over email, I will kind of address it in a funny way, but the point is taken.
Yeah,
And so just kind of committing to when I see it, I will call it out and I will
I love
address
that.
it so that people become more aware. Because I think most
Yeah.
of the time it's not with malintent, it's just
Right.
unconscious.
I think that is so true.
And if they're aware of
yes,
it, they try to fix it or at least try to think about it, 2 or 3 times the next time.
I think that's such a good point. And you really do give others courage to speak up the next time. If you can do it in a way that, everybody realizes, hey, this is okay. The room doesn't fall apart. We're able to call this out. We're able to have a thoughtful realization about it. And the best kind of folks are the ones who's exactly what you said, Kweilin, have no idea that that was, the effect they created. And I think it's a wonderful way to role model having that courage for
Yes.
other people, which
Yeah.
is great.
And that's also a very practical thing that allies can do to help, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
We talked a lot already. I mean, there's clearly a lot of things that women can do to either mend the broken rung or jump over the broken rung, right? And books like things like your book or initiatives like Next Generation Leaders help hopefully women with a toolkit to overcome some of those things. But like we just said with biases, allies can help call biases out. What else could others and allies do to help women on the way?
I think sponsor women, right? Like it really comes down to sponsorship. We have a lot of the mentorship side already. I also think giving tough feedback. Women and people of
Yes.
color tend to get less tough feedback across our careers.
Oh, interesting.
And you
Yeah.
think, tough feedback, frankly, doesn't sound pleasant. Maybe I don't want a lot of that. But that is how we grow, right? That is how we hear hard.
Yes, that's how you build that experience capital, right?
Yes.
You got to know what you're doing
Exactly.
well, what you need to focus on. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if men are getting more tough feedback, right, they're hearing those hard truths earlier, more consistently.
Yep.
They're able to grow from that, even if it's an unpleasant experience. And so kind of giving tough feedback kind of equally across your team is important. The final thing I would say is there's this element of, we call it being in the power alley. And if you're in consulting, the power alley is being a consultant. If
Yep.
you're in a law firm, it's being a lawyer. If you're in a tech company, it's being in product management, right? You'll hear people say, be close to the cash register. Know how your company, how your industry makes
Yep.
money, how it makes profit. And you may not stay there for your entire career because it tends to be on the more kind of intense side of things, right? If you're in a newspaper or media company, it would be in sales, for example, or ad sales in some cases. But it helps you understand how things work, what the currency of your industry is. And then even if you leave after a few years, you can take that perspective to other roles.
Yeah.
And it informs kind of how you grow. And so that is, after picking the right company, that's the kind of another really big driver of lifetime earnings is being in the power alley. It's actually correlated to about 20% higher lifetime earnings. And interestingly, just over a third of men start in the power alley or kind of in these profit and loss roles. Just under a third of women do. But doing that early, so it informs all your other roles, back to the cross-functional mobility, really makes a difference.
That's really interesting. We sometimes talk about being in the arena, right? That we want part of the exciting element of our value proposition is you get to have a seat at the table. You get to be in the room with senior people working on things. So I love this idea of power alley and making conscious choices where you can be close to the frontline work and the real value proposition of whatever company you're working for. I think that's
And
great.
understanding what it is for the company or the industry
Exactly.
you choose to go into, right?
Exactly.
Making that
We've
part
had,
of your research.
we've gotten a lot of interesting questions to us throughout the discussion. And of course, we'll never have time to answer all of them. But an interesting one, Kweilin, that you talk about in the book, we haven't talked about yet, is the notion of parenthood and how that can be a contributing factor to this disparity we see in terms of progression and trajectory. How in your research and in the book, how do you sort of compare that for motherhood versus fatherhood in some respects, where you see the gender split? How does that play out in terms of the broken rung?
Yeah, it's pretty distressing when you look at the data because globally there is a motherhood bias or a motherhood penalty and a fatherhood bonus. In fact, As
Wow.
men have children, and this increases with
Correct.
each kind of additional child they
Yep.
have, they're viewed as more responsible, more mature. Their pay on average, right, large distribution, but their pay on average goes up. Mothers, women with children, especially even if you compare them to women without children, are less likely to get an interview callback, less likely to get hired, less likely to get a promotion. In fact, I can give you two identical resumes. We can scientifically test this.
Mm-hmm.
And I just put John Doe versus Jane Doe. Uh, Men and women, back to our bias conversation, will
Yep.
ascribe higher leadership and higher future potential to John Doe because we have so socialized this notion of leadership being male,
Yep.
in some cases white and tall, but we can't kind of see that same potential for the female candidate, who frankly, neither of these people exist. We just literally created these resumes for test
Yep.
purposes. Now, if I put on that Jane Doe resume, I just change one bullet point, active parent-teacher association member, or some signal that she is an active parent, it's about 86% less likely to get the job because men and women have this notion of, ooh, she is prioritizing being an active parent. She is not going to be as good of an employee. There's sort of split priorities here. And there's real kind of bias here in the system. And so it's real when women think about, ooh, maybe I don't want to talk about my kids too much or picking up my children. How do we normalize that for men and
Yeah.
women and equalize the playing field? Because right now, this motherhood bias and the fatherhood kind of bonus is real.
Yeah. And I love, I love that we're being authentic about our own biases. You know, how many times have you thought as you're thinking about a project, for example, something coming up that you're thinking through your team? Oh, who would be great to take this project? I will admit I've been guilty myself sometimes of thinking, oh, so-and-so just had a baby or they just came back from maternity leave. They've got their hands full. Maybe they don't want to take this project right now. That's bias, right? That's part of the
Absolutely.
tax that I'm actually saying I'm going to withhold that opportunity from you. Again, however well-intended that may be, that's actually part of the tax is you don't
Absolutely.
have the same sort of opportunity creation, for example, that someone else has who's not deemed a
Yeah.
parent, an active parent.
Ask them, right? Offer the opportunity.
Yes.
Let them
Exactly.
turn
Let
it
them
down.
tell
They
you
know
no.
best. Yeah.
And I think it's super important what you said, Kweilin. It's biases women and men have. It's not just men who have these
Yes.
biases, and it's often. I mean, it's so cultural often, and so much ingrained in how societies think and the views societies have that it just affects everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Yes.
interesting because our three co-authors, Lorena, Marian, and I, each of us have three children. So we've gone through
Yeah.
this kind of
Yeah,
maternity
multiple
leave
times.
frequently.
That's right. That's right.
But one of the things I'm proudest of across our diversity and inclusion is our kind of onboarding approach. And interestingly, one of, I think, our biggest improvements in this sort of on-ramp and maternity leave kind of reboarding program came when we increased our paternity leave benefits, at least in the
Yes.
US. We
Yes.
all got better at on-ramps for everybody, right? It was just a muscle
Yes.
that we needed to build a little bit more.
Yes.
And now we've got a global program that helps women before they leave, during, as they come back with mentors, with coaches, with kind of support on the staffing front to kind of find an in-town opportunity and create more flexibility there. So I think that's one of the pivotal points across a career that we've really gotten right internally. But the data outside is still quite sobering.
Yes. And again, that's an example. I love that as that's intentional sponsorship. That is hardwiring, creating opportunities for people, helping them both on the offboarding and back on the onboarding at those critical moments where it would be too easy to fall behind from an experience capital standpoint. So I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Pivotal.
Blair and Marie, I know we didn't get to this, and I know as we kind of get closer
Yes.
to time, I just want to talk about a topic I'm so passionate about. And as I think
Please.
about women starting in your careers, like what I wish I had known earlier,
Yes.
is one of the final chapters. And we talk about both women's health, our physical health, our mental health, but also our financial health and making our money work for us. And so I'll just kind of capture a couple of the highlights that I frankly wish I had known 25 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
This is perfect also for the last part of our
That's right.
So the snack
Our
for the
snack
road,
for
right?
the
This is
road.
discussion
That's
Snack for
right.
the road. Okay, excellent.
right.
So snack away. But what we found in some of our research is women, we all think, oh, wonderful, we live longer. Great, right? Like that's good news, live longer than men. But we also spend around the world 25% more years in poor health. And that's really alarming. We also spend, no surprise, more money on healthcare, partly because we're living longer and 25% more years in poor health. You would expect that. But you combine that poorer health and more healthcare expenses with lower average retirement savings, right?
Yes.
Around the world, women have
Yep.
the majority of part-time jobs, majority of part-time jobs and minority of full-time jobs. We're working on average fewer hours given leaves and all of these things. So we have lower retirement savings trying to stretch over a longer period with higher costs. That is not a financial equation that works well. And
That's
so
right.
just planning for that, advocating for yourself on the health front, both physical and mental side.
I love that.
But then also starting earlier in making your money work for you.
Yes.
And I think the good news for me when I dug into the data is you don't have to be an expert. In fact, the benefits of being an expert on kind of financial planning and financial decisions are not that much more than if you are just kind of moderately knowledgeable.
Okay.
But the difference between like, I don't really know much, I'm not involved, getting to moderate knowledge, those benefits are considerable. So do
Yep.
yourself a favor. It's a little bit like compound interest, right? You hope that you start compounding your interest as young as possible. But if you haven't already, the second best time is now.
Now, right, just
So
get
start as
started.
early as you can in terms of kind of retirement savings, yes, but also just being involved in your financial life. So
love that.
many women do not make those financial decisions. And in the finance world, if you don't make a decision, that is in fact making a decision. And so just getting more knowledgeable, comfortable, getting to that moderate level of
I love
knowledge so
that.
that you can in fact save for all of those healthcare expenses that will
Yeah.
like been at least on average.
I love
And
that.
that relates to me very much because, and I like what you said, when it's never too late, right? Even if you didn't start early,
right.
just start now. Because for many years, my husband always laughed at me that I would jump at every penny on the street and be so excited and happy about it. But like with my own financials, I was not very organized. So it took a few years of marriage that he finally was like, enough is enough. You just need to take a more active interest in managing your finances and think about your retirement and your savings in the future. So it took me a while, but it's never too late to start, and it's definitely important.
I love that. And not just for women, that's for everybody, right?
Oh,
And
for sure.
I love your second best is starting now, which is great.
Yes. Yes.
Kweilin, thank you. This has been such a
Amazing.
wonderful discussion. If you haven't yet gone out and grabbed a copy of Broken Rung,
Buy the book.
go get it. It is wonderful. It is
Life-changing.
It really is. And one of the things, Kweilin, that I'm so grateful to you and Lorena and Maria, it's a user-friendly book. That is something that I love is at the heart of it, aside from the stories, which just always makes it richer and more personal. It's about women helping other women and helping allies help women. And that's just a wonderful message. So it's practical. It's a great read. It's fascinating. It's sobering, but it's ultimately empowering. So again, Kweilin, thank you so much. And guys, thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you on our next Unpack session.
Thank
See
you.
soon.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you, Kweilin.
Thanks,
Thank
Kweilin.
Bye.
Bye.